Welcome to the first issue of The Walking Dead audio comic, presented by Gene Grasso. This is a serialized dramatic reading of The Walking Dead comic books. This is the first episode, and these will be presented in order. The following episode is for mature audiences. Listener discretion is advised. The police car screeched to a halt as officers Rick Grimes and Shane Walsh jumped out and took cover amid a hail of gunfire. "This is not good," Shane said, looking at Rick as he pulled his gun from its holster. "I don't think he's from around here," Shane remarked, looking over at Rick. Rick had his revolver out now as they both huddled behind their police cruiser. "I think that's a safe bet," Rick replied. "When they opened that prison in Grant County, I didn't think we'd be getting their runoff." "I ain't going back. I'll die first," the convict screamed as he reloaded his rifle to fire again at the officers. "Damn it," Rick yelled. "Our backup is probably more than 10 miles away. We're sitting ducks behind this car." Slowly, Rick moved towards the front end of the car. "Cover me," he said to Shane. "I'm going to try and make it to that ditch so we can surround him." As Rick got up to make a run for it, Shane aimed his weapon at the criminal who was at a wrecked truck just slightly down the road. The convict fired wildly in their direction, and with a lucky shot the criminal's bullet hit Shane's gun, sending it flying from his hand. As he held his aching hand, Shane turned to Rick as the criminal took aim this time, and fired another shot hitting Rick in the chest. "Rick!" Shane yelled as his partner fell to the ground wounded. Rick awoke with a gasp of air in the hospital bed, not sure of how he had gotten there or how much time had passed since he was shot. Slowly, he sat up in the bed and removed the breathing tube from his nose. He threw his legs over the side of the bed and grabbed the IV stand to help get himself up. As he stood, he wobbled a little from weakness and fell to the floor, the IV stand coming down next to him. "Nurse!" Rick yelled out as he laid on the floor needing help to get up, but no one came. He pulled himself into a seated position, turned, and reached over the edge of the bed and furiously pressed the nurse's call button. Still, no one came. For a few minutes, Rick sat there wondering what was going on. He looked to his right and saw a dresser there next to the bed. He pulled himself towards it and opened the bottom drawer. Inside were his pants, a t-shirt, his shoes, and badge. Rick got himself together, got up, dressed, and made his way to the door of his hospital room. As he got to the opening, he once again called out, "Hello!" He moved himself just outside the doorway, but still weak, propped himself up against the wall, and called out once again, "Hello! Anybody!" He took a minute to steady himself, and then walked slowly down the hallway to the nurse's station at the end. When Rick arrived at the desk, he found it abandoned. "What the hell?" he said as he looked around the desk for any signs of life. "Did everyone just decide to take a break at the same time?" Rick continued down the hall, still looking for anyone that was around, until he came to an elevator bank. He pressed the button to call the elevator, and when it arrived at the floor, He got in and headed for another floor to try and find someone. Anyone. The elevator slowed as it reached its destination, and as the doors opened, the body fell to the ground. Ah! Rick screamed, shocked and surprised by the turn of events. He knelt down next to the body and could see that it had been torn apart, the intestines spilling out and the face decomposing. Help! He yelled as he jumped to his feet, hoping someone would come and explain what was happening. Somebody, help! He moved past the body and out of the elevator into another hallway, still looking for a doctor, a nurse, a patient, anyone. Anybody, he softly said to the silence. Continuing down the one hallway, he came to another hallway that led to the cafeteria. As he approached the doors, he noticed a 2x4 had been placed in the door handles to keep something out or in. What the hell? Rick said to himself as he stopped for a second to look at the door. What happened here? He spoke aloud as he approached the doors cautiously, and after sliding the board out of the handles, he pulled the double doors open. Inside was a scene of terrific horror. The cafeteria looked like a war zone. Bodies lay all over the place, littering the tables and floors. Some of the deceased were lying still on the floor in crumpled heaps in various stages of decomposition, but still others. The others seemed to be moving around. The one closest to the door turned to look at Rick and with a low gurgling sound slowly shuffled towards him. Rick couldn't believe what he was witnessing. It had to be a nightmare. Now the other people in the room, if he could even call them people, started their movements in his direction. Rick could not find any words as he started moving backwards, away from the approaching mob. As he did, he lost his footing and fell backwards to the floor. He started pushing himself away, but the mob kept coming closer and closer. Stop! Rick yelled at them. Get away from me! The closest one grabbed Rick by the front of his shirt as he pulled himself up off the floor. Can't you understand? His face now full of terror. He desperately tried to get away and fell through a door into a stairwell, tumbling down a flight of stairs, taking the still clinging thing with him. As they fell, twisting and turning over one another, there was a loud crack as Rick landed on the neck of the creature that was holding him, snapping its head almost completely off its body. Oh! Quickly, Rick stood up and made his way down the next flight of stairs while the other creatures slowly made their way down after him. As he approached the door, he pushed it open hard and ran through. He took off his belt and quickly wrapped it around the door handles so no more of those things could get through. What the hell was that? He said to himself as he turned to look where he was. Rick stood in the hospital parking garage, staring at the one car that remained, a puzzled look on his face. He made his way towards the car and tried the handle, but no luck, it was locked. Damn! He said as he started to walk out of the garage and towards the main road that passed by Harrison Memorial Hospital. Once on the main road, Rick walked along slowly, looking for any signs of life. There were no cars driving on the road, and all of the people seemed to have disappeared. Eventually, he came upon a car that had hit a tree not far from the hospital he had just left. Jesus! He said to himself as he looked at the twisted wreck. A body lay out the driver's side in an advanced stage of decomposition. He continued up the road a little way until something caught his eye lying off the side of the road by a speed limit signpost. Rick gasped as he approached the bicycle lying in some tall grass. There, next to the bicycle, were the remains of the owner, almost completely decomposed, still moving, struggling, unable to lift itself off the ground. As Rick looked at what was left of what once was a human being, he covered his mouth in disbelief, a tear starting to come to his eye. The creature just lay there, gurgling, unable to speak anymore, staring right back at Rick. The two watched each other for a moment longer as the tear ran down Rick's face. He then picked up the bicycle, a good mode of transportation if ever, and started to walk it down the road. As he got several hundred feet from the body of the owner, he dropped the bike to the ground and fell to his knees. "Oh, God," he said softly to himself as he looked to the sky, still not understanding what exactly was happening. He put his head in his hands and bent over, emotion pouring out of him. Slowly, Rick stood up and looked over at the bicycle lying on the ground right next to him. He picked it up and, wiping the tears from his eyes, got on and started pedaling for the one place he knew to go, the place he would surely find some answers. Home. Papers littered the street as Rick rode the bicycle into his neighborhood. There were no signs of life anywhere, and the yards of his neighbors looked as though they hadn't been manicured in weeks. Windows were broken and doors were left open, as if everyone had left in a hurry. As Rick approached his home, he dropped the bicycle into the tall grass of his front yard and quickly moved up the front stairs where the screen door was slowly swaying in the light breeze. "Son of a bitch!" he said as he grabbed a hold of the screen door with his right hand and pushed it open. He turned the handle of the front door, and surprisingly, it was unlocked. He opened the door and walked into his house. Rick looked around the living room for a bit, wondering where his family had gone as he walked past a picture of him, his wife, and his son that hung on the wall. Glass, paper, and other debris littered the house, as if his family had abandoned the place in a hurry. Rick made his way to his bedroom and opened the door, not knowing what to expect. Still, there was no one there. He headed back into the main living area and walked towards the sliding doors that led into his backyard. He walked out onto the back porch and leaned up against the railing, a feeling of despair coming over him. "Nothing," he said to himself as he looked down at the ground, wondering where his family could have gone. Rick walked down the stairs and into the backyard, noticing a car in his neighbor's yard. He made his way towards the car, and as he approached it, he looked back at his house one last time as a shovel came down on the back of his head, knocking him out cold. A young African-American boy holding a shovel stood over Rick, who was now lying unconscious on the ground, and called out for his father. "Dad!" The boy's father, a middle-aged man with a goatee and several days' stubble, rushed over to the boy to see what was going on. "Jesus, shit, son, what did you do?" The boy, still holding the shovel with a determined look on his face, said, "He was going to try to eat us, Dad." The man gently laid his hand on the boy's shoulder and looked from the unconscious stranger on the ground to his son. "No, son, this man is alive." "Oh." "Grab his feet, help me get him inside." Slowly, Rick opened one eye and looked towards an open doorway. "Huh?" he exclaimed as the man who had brought him to safety walked by. The man looked into the room and said, "Oh, you're awake. We're just getting ready to have dinner. Would you care to join us?" Rick, still dazed from the blow to his head, sat up and replied to the man, "Wait, what the hell is going on here?" Rick got up from the bed and made his way into the next room. The boy who had hit him was seated at a small dining table, and his father was placing a small bowl of food down. Rick grabbed a chair, and as he began to sit down, the man looked at him with a slight frown. "Oh, sorry about my boy. He hit you over the head with a shovel." With a puzzled look, Rick questioned the man. "Huh? What are you talking about?" The man looked at Rick and softly replied, "He thought you were one of those things." Rick jumped up with a shocked look on his face and started to back away from the table. "Things? You mean those monsters that are at the hospital? Who are you people? What the hell is going on?" The man slowly got up from his chair and held up his hand to show he meant Rick no harm. Whoa, calm down there, buddy. This was all just a misunderstanding. My boy didn't mean nothing." The puzzled look returned to Rick's face as he again questioned the man. "How did it all happen? What went wrong?" Now a puzzled look appeared on the man's face. He couldn't believe that Rick had no idea what was going on in the world outside their door. "Wait a minute. Hold up. Damn! Son, you don't know about any of it?" After dinner, Rick, the man, and his boy retired to the living room. The boy lay on the floor reading a comic book while Rick and the man talked. "I was shot," Rick explained to the man. "I woke up in the hospital and was attacked. I came home. My wife and kid gone. The whole damn town was deserted. I didn't know what the hell was going on. You say nobody knows what caused it?" "All media shut down after a few weeks," the man said to Rick in a calm tone. "I haven't heard much of anything after that. If they found a way to stop it, they haven't made it here yet. Those things are everywhere. A good blow to the head will take 'em out. That's why the boy whacked you with our shovel. Nothing much else seems to faze them. Any time one wanders into the yard, we take care of it. We try to keep quiet. They'd come after us if they knew we was here." The man's expression changed slightly to one of concern. "Before they stopped broadcasting, they told us to relocate to the bigger cities. They said they could protect us all there. I figure I'd be better off taking my chances here." Rick leaned forward a little to start to get out of the chair. "My in-laws live in Atlanta. It's only a 5-hour drive from here. That's probably where my wife went. Thank God. If they're protecting the cities, man, I was so worried." Rick stood up as the man leaned back in his chair with a slight smile on his face. "Oh yeah, I'm sure they're fine." Reaching into his pocket, Rick pulled out a set of keys and held them up for the man to see. "Well, I need a car if I'm going to get to Atlanta. Want to go shopping?" he said as a slight smile came across his face. Rick and his new friends arrived at the police station where Rick worked before everything happened. Some of the windows were broken, and papers littered the front parking lot. They parked the car in the spot closest to the entrance and walked towards it together. Rick pulled out his keys to open the locked door. "So you're a cop, huh?" the man said with a worried tone to his voice. "Yep." "I figured you for a hunter after you said you got shot and all," the man, still a little worried, said to Rick. "You being a cop, you don't mind my boy and I taking residence at your neighbor's place, do you?" As he heard this, Rick looked back at the man and grinned slightly. "I'm not going to arrest you if that's what you mean. Most of the houses on the street had been looted. You seem to be fixing the place up. The Thompsons will probably thank you when they get back, as long as you don't put up a fight over the place." Rick opened the door to the darkened room, and as the man looked in, he felt he had to say something. "It's not like we're stealing the place. Your neighborhood just seems safer. We don't figure that we're hurting anybody by staying there, and in my book, that makes it okay." As Rick flicked on the lights, he replied, "You don't have to justify anything to me. You're keeping your son safe. I'm worried sick about mine. I understand." A smile came across the man's face as he turned to look at Rick. "I appreciate that. You know, I don't think I got your name." Rick smiled back at the man and held out his hand. "Rick, Officer Rick Grimes at your service. And you?" The man reached out and took Rick's hand to shake it. "Oh, Morgan Jones. And this here is little Dwayne." Rick walked over to his desk and slowly pulled the top drawer open as Morgan looked around the place. Rick felt comfortable with Morgan around. "You're a good man, Morgan. I really appreciate you driving me over here. You've helped me out a lot." "It's worth it just to get to talk to someone," Morgan replied, still looking around the office. "If it ain't about cartoons or passing gas, my boy don't want to talk about it." As Rick looked down into his desk drawer, a smile came across his face as a slight chuckle passed his lips. A thought crossed his mind, and the smile quickly faded to a frown. "Damn, after everything I've seen today, I feel guilty for laughing." Morgan walked over to the desk and placed his hand on Rick's shoulder to comfort him. "Hey man, it's okay. You've seen some crazy shit out there. We all have. You can't let it get to you. You just gotta keep going. You can't stop to think about it or you'll go crazy." "Yeah," Rick replied as he reached into the drawer and pulled out his service revolver. A worried look came across Morgan's face, his hand still on Rick's shoulder. "What's up with that?" Morgan asked, concerned. As Rick opened the chamber to the gun to inspect it, he answered Morgan. "Oh, this? I figured I might as well bring a few along just in case. Speaking of which, follow me." Rick led Morgan to a locked door just on the other side of the office. As Rick looked for the right key to open the door, Morgan and Dwayne watched with curious looks on their faces. "I just need to find the right key. Here we are." Rick opened the door and clicked the light switch inside. The glow of the light fell into the station armory. Morgan and Dwayne stepped in with a look of wonder on their faces. "Wow," Morgan said as he looked around the room. In the corner, closest to the door, was a locked cage next to a small cabinet that presumably held the handguns and other weapons. There were rifles and shotguns on racks against one wall, and on the other, bulletproof vests hung. On the shelf above were riot helmets. A battering ram sat alone in the corner. "Grab a couple for yourself. If whacking those things in the head with a shovel does them in, I'm sure those things will work. Should save you some effort," Rick said as he pointed to the rack holding the rifles and shotguns. "The shells are in the cabinet below the gun rack. Save some for me. I'll be right back." Dwayne ran over to the gun rack excitedly and grabbed hold of the desk. He looked up at the rifle that was just above him. "Can I?" he said as Morgan walked over. "No, damn it. Don't touch anything," Morgan scolded Dwayne as he reached for a rifle on the rack. As he removed two of the guns from the rack, Dwayne looked up at his father and said, "But I'm old enough." Morgan looked at his son and replied in a softer tone than he had used before. "Yes, you are. And I'm going to teach you how to use one of them tomorrow." His voice then raised slightly. "But until then, they're off limits." Rick re-entered the room, fully dressed in his uniform, wearing his police jacket and hat. "Are there enough shells for both of us in there?" he asked Morgan. Morgan looked over at Rick, who gave off an air of authority. "Well, that get-up certainly suits you," he said. Rick looked down at his outfit and then replied to Morgan. "I keep a spare uniform in my locker. I figured if I was going into a big city and they've got a ton of people holed up there, I could get around easier being a cop, so I might as well look the part." A big smile crossed Rick's face as he grabbed a rifle and a few boxes of shells. He turned back to Morgan and said, "Grab what you're getting and follow me out back. I've got another surprise for you." Rick, Morgan, and Dwayne, fully loaded with all the weapons and ammo they could carry, made their way to a door that led out to the back of the police station. As they walked out the door, Rick led them to a couple of police cruisers that were parked in a fenced-in lot. "You take that one on the left. It doesn't run as good as the one I'm taking, but it'll run better than that hatchback you're driving. If I'm going to make it all the way to Atlanta, I'm going to need the newer one." Shocked, Morgan tried to find something to say. "Wait, what?" As Rick approached his vehicle, he turned back to Morgan, who still had a look of disbelief on his face. "You'll be safer in one of these things if you need to go anywhere." "But The words barely left Morgan's lips. Rick held out the car keys for Morgan. "Don't sweat it, man. I'm just doing my job. I can't think of a better way to protect and serve under the circumstances." Morgan held out his hand and gratefully accepted the keys. Rick opened the door to the car and started to load his weapons in. He looked over at Morgan and Dwayne, who were starting to head towards the other cruiser. "When things get back to normal, you'll have to give it back, so try not to bang it up or put too many miles on it," Rick said. Morgan stopped and for a moment looked at Rick with a grateful, relieved expression on his face. "Thank you, Rick. I can't tell you how much this will help us." As Rick finished loading his equipment into the car, he replied to Morgan, "Look, you've already helped." The sound of something hitting the fence closest to the cars caught Rick's attention. He turned suddenly, a look of concern on his face. "What was that?" Behind them, on the other side of the chain-link fence that separated the station from the parking lot, one of the creatures held on, desperately trying to get to the warm bodies on the other side. Terrified, Rick reached down and pulled his gun out of the holster. "Look out!" he yelled to Morgan and Dwayne, who started to back away. The creature became more violent at the sight of this, shaking and pulling on the fence, trying its best to get through. Rick pointed his gun and took aim at the creature, ready to put it out of its misery, when Morgan's hand came down upon it. "No," he said as he placed his other hand on Rick's shoulder. "Leave it be. It can't get in here. You may need that bullet later." Rick looked at Morgan and returned the gun to the holster at his side. "Yeah, you're right. We better get these cars out of here before it makes its way around to the gate." The two men made their way to their respective cars and started to climb in. As Morgan opened the driver's side door, he called over to Rick. "I'll see you around." Rick stopped, leaning halfway in the car, and replied back to Morgan, "Of course. We're neighbors. Keep an eye on my house for me." "Will do," Morgan called back and climbed into the cruiser. As he started up the car, Rick made his way over to the gate and opened it for Morgan to drive through. Once Morgan was on his way, Rick got into his car, started it up, and pulled out of the lot. He stopped the car just outside the gate, walked over it, and locked it up tight. As he got back into his car and drove off, he could see in his rearview mirror the lone creature standing by the gate staring at him as he drove off. As Rick made his way through town, there was not a single living person in sight. The streets were littered with paper and debris, store windows were shattered, and once in a while a lone creature would shamble by. Rick continued on slowly until he was outside of town, and found himself on the road that he had just walked hours before. He came upon the signpost where the bicycle and rider laid in the tall grass and pulled the car to a stop. He exited the vehicle and slowly made his way over to where the decomposing creature still lay, apparently unable to move anywhere. The creature let out a low, guttural groan as Rick stopped and stood over it, his revolver in his hand. Without a second thought, he pulled the trigger, a bullet piercing the skull of the creature, silencing it forever. He stood and watched, staring at the remains of what once was a human being, and a tear came to his eye. Morgan was right, Rick thought to himself. The bullet had put the remains of the poor bicycle girl out of her misery. He lifted his hand to his face and wiped away the tear from his eye. With a more purposeful gait, Rick walked out of the grass and made his way back to the car. Without looking back, he got in, started it up, and drove off down the road on his way to Atlanta. He knew the world had changed, and maybe in some small way, so had he. This podcast is not endorsed by Skybound, Image Comics, or Robert Kirkman. It is intended for entertainment purposes only. The Walking Dead, all characters, names of characters, or other Walking Dead related items are registered trademarks and or copyrights of Skybound LLC and their respective trademark and copyright holders. The official Walking Dead site can be found at www.thewalkingdead.com. The Walking Dead audio comic is narrated and performed by Gene Grasso. There you have issue number 1 of The Walking Dead audio comic. Please be sure to follow us on Facebook. It's at facebook.com/,
WD Audio Comic Podcast, and on Twitter, WD Audio Comic. You could also email us at wdac@nerdnewsfactory.com. Thanks for listening, and stay tuned for the next episode.